Arc is back and doing about 34 times more damage than it usually should. This Arc of Surging Assassin is specifically highlighting the shotgun interaction provided by Arc of Surging alongside Hydrosphere. It's also a really well-rounded build with incredibly solid defenses that are based mostly off a pre-league tree that Dan designed for a Firestorm Trickster. The main interaction though that makes this build so powerful is that Arc of Surging, when hitting Hydrosphere, can then chain off or split off and actually hit the second enemy, that's usually a single target boss, with as many remaining chains as there are. So if I have 10 total remaining chains and I hit the Hydrosphere one time, it can then be chained 10 times. However, for some reason, Unleash and Spell Echo also work. Mathematically, I think just using Unleash is best because Hydrosphere can only be hit once per second anyway. So I basically wait to unleash Big Arc on Hydrosphere, which then can hit a boss 50 times per cast. The sad thing though is that this is still weaker, I think, than Penance Brand of Dissipation. That skill gem, even without any special interactions, is just straight up stronger than basically any other spellcaster skill in the game right now. More importantly though, I want to highlight the details of this build. There are so many insane efficiencies about what's going on inside of this thing. It is super smooth to play. It's got pretty good clear, although that is the weakest point, which is why I need to supplement it with Oriath's End. Let's go over what's going on. If Arc gets changed, you can always swap this over to another lightning skill, Penance Brand, Storm Brand, Ball Lightning, who knows? But the details are crazy. So at its baseline, this is a power charge stacker that's using Badge, Ralakesh. Nothing too special there. We've seen these 4 items time and time again: Void Battery, Malakai's Loop, Ralakesh, and Badge. However, one of the really big things that when you stack this many power charges, in this case for my build I have 10, Anathema is insane, right? My curse limit on this build is basically 10, so I've never actually hit my curse limit. So I'm using Ellie Weak, Assassin's Mark, Connectivity. I'm also using Punishment, Enfeeble, Temporal Chains. Now normally this is quite annoying to do. You don't really want to manually cast 6 curses. However, there's 2 ways I do it with just pressing 2 buttons, and one of them is instant. I have a focus helmet up here that's really great for utility. I get to automatically trigger these 4 spells, Frost Shield, and then 3 curses, and then the other 3 curses are procced with an Arcanist Brand. So there's really no problem in terms of playability and smoothness, or you're not actually pressing 6 different buttons. The second thing to note is that I do want to use Power Charge on crit as one of my primary damage supports. Because of this and Malakai's Loop, if you're not ailment immune or you're not shock immune in my case, then you will get shocked, and that is, not a penalty you really want to be taking on with this kind of build. So to solve for elemental ailment immunity, I'm using an Ancestral Vision, which gives you 50% avoidance, this Veiled Prefix, which is actually really easy to craft this chest, and then I'm also using a Anoint for Crystal Skin, which gives you max res and also 20% more chance to avoid elemental ailments. Really easy solve, really elegant. This is one of those things that you could just buy, but this is a Dense Fossil spam over here. This is also a Dense Fossil spam, just for prefixes. On the Vol Regalia, this is just a Reforged defense, so you get a T2 or T1% increased energy shield, and then you lock prefix, you go for an Ashling. That's where the gamble sort of is. It can be a bit more expensive to do, but it's still relatively progressive. Same deal with the helmet, Fractured Prefix, and then I'm Dense Fossil spamming again. The other really powerful helmet you could go for, and I know most people would rather go for, is a Warlord and something else, Awakened helmet. You get +1 power charge, you get +1 unleash. That does give you a ton more damage, but you don't really want to be giving up those prefixes on this. My Fizz hit is fantastic on this build. I mean, I can tank Shaper Slime, as you would have seen in the old video. No problem at all. And having the shift plus the ES is really big, because that 300 almost ES that I'm getting off this helmet is also getting jacked up by this mastery over here, giving you 100% increased energy field from the equipped helmet. The other really cool thing is that despite the fact that this is an assassin, firstly, it's fairly tanky because I'm choosing to use the Soul Drinker jewels that give you Trickster Overleach. If these happen to be expensive, they were like 5 divines when I bought them, just be a Trickster and have less damage. Or conversely, be a Trickster and run any of the assassin jewels that are insane. This one's good, this one's good, this one's good, this one's good, this one's good. Honestly, all of these are crazy. Even the Sabo jewels, Explosives Expert is really solid, and so is Born in the Shadows. I don't know, there's just a lot of other good options, but if you can't get this, I would definitely play this build as a Trickster instead, because otherwise your ES recovery just isn't enough in my opinion. Beyond that, this is also a perma flask build. You can see that my average flask uptime is 100%, although there will be low lulls. So in that scenario, I actually run a use at the end as the enchant instead of use on full, and this pretty much guarantees full flask uptime, even when you're constantly zoning in and out of instances. And I was mostly using this build as a Sanctum runner. And the way we're able to do this is a mix of things. Firstly, it does run the Trader. It runs Trader with 1 empty flask slot, so that's really great over there. Secondly, I run a micro distillery. This doesn't actually help you with sustain. It's a brute force craft as far as getting any sort of flask mods on here. I just want to increase effect at the very end. I mean, you can have better flask sustain if you roll this differently. And then the Vol Regalia. That implicit is probably one of the more annoying things to go for. It's really just Orb of Conflicts once you get a flask charge game with a Grand Ichor or Ember. I forgot which one it is, but And with that combination of things, you're pretty much able to fully sustain your flasks. There are also charms that give you one flash charge every 3 seconds. They're a little bit more expensive, but they can be really solid. The charms I'm running though are pretty much just for damage. This one's also super cool. This chills from your hits reduce action speed by 6%. Normally this doesn't matter because I can't do cold damage. But again, yoinking from Dan, I get this cold damage to spells from my helmet. And that gives you just enough cold damage that you can apply a baseline chill. And then this baseline chill can be scaled by things like this critical strike mastery, giving you more non-damaging element effect with your crits, and you're pretty much always. The rest of the tree should be fairly easy to understand. I mean, it's pretty much just a regular power charge tree, but after looking at Dan's tree in the pre-league, and especially looking at the ninja profiles right now, the thing that I'm realizing is that power charge stacking trees actually really struggle to get life. I mean, it should be fairly obvious, but it's the one stat that's really hard to get. And instead going for CI and compensating mostly through gear, or sometimes, as a trickster with this node Escape Artist, can be really effective for still getting decent defenses. I mean, this is without a guard skill, right? If I go and put on a Mortal Call on this thing, like, this is a really tanky build, honestly. I would say the one weak side though is clear. When you're doing really highly juiced maps, you really need to run Ori Ascend. If you don't have that, you're definitely gonna struggle. No, I know that was a little bit messy in terms of covering both the gear and the tree, but I just want to talk about the interactions more than I want to really specifically compartmentalize how I'm describing the build. I would say that making this thing is much more efficient if you're self-crafting your gear. It is unlikely that you're just going to buy gear that will really fit. There isn't that much need for resistances because it's a fake blood build. If you really struggle with res, you could skip this. You could turn this suffix into a res suffix and then play the stun mastery on ES over here and then play Brine King. I don't like doing that. I think getting pure stun immunity is really nice, especially when you're trying to kill uber bosses. Just makes a world of difference. Last thing to go over here is the skill gem setup. So I am running an Enlighten, which is, I mean, it's getting pretty expensive now. It's something like 3 divines. Shield charge, faster attacks for your movement, and then the really important Hydrosphere, and this is what allows for that chaining interaction, for that shotgunning split. Frost Shield, Conductivity, Assmark, LA Weak, I've covered this already. This is in your helmet focus. When you press focus, these 4 skills will automatically trigger. Now, in other setups, you can go for things like Focus DD on Weapon and Shield if you're not a Power Charge stacker. You could get Focus Attack Speed and Cast Speed if you're not this sort of Unleash 1 second hitter Hydrosphere playstyle. But, really big fan of Focus these days, especially at the low end. Main links, Arc of Surging. I haven't leveled up my stuff yet. Once it does, it makes a really big difference. Awaken Chain is swapped in when I want to do clearing. I have 1 white socket on my chest. Frostwing is my instant skill. It's in my ring because I am super socket starved because of all of these curses that I want to run. If you want to, you could skip one of these 2 curses. I mean, defensive curses aren't really well loved by the community, but Temporal Chains, firstly, again, as Dan reminds me, extends the duration of your curses. This actually gives you better curse uptime, especially on those focus curses. And then it also slows the enemies down, which is great. And I think Enfeeble just is strong. It's free defense. It's just free power. Lastly, instead of running Divine Blessing, I go for a Guardian's Blessing. There's 2 reasons why I like to do this. Firstly, Guardian's Blessing with Wrath is instant. This skill, when you're using it like this, is not like Divine Blessing. It doesn't give the skill a cast time. So pretty much anytime your aura does fall down, you can instantly proc it. Secondly, there's no mana cost. My mana cost when I was making this build was fluctuating quite a bit, and then because I'm a mana based build, not going with Eldritch Battery, it's really annoying, and sometimes you actually get too much mana to run your Blessing. I find this setup to be really good, and the raised Spectre that you want to use is a Dark Marionette, and these are the Spectres that will automatically resurrect themselves every time they die. Once they desync in a map, once they die at 2 different times, your Wrath aura will have fairly good uptime. Otherwise, you have to recast your aura something like once every 10-15 seconds. I don't really know, to be honest, but I find this setup to feel way better, personally, than Divine Blessing. The last thing, if you're planning to reroll a build like this, which by the way, I think is super efficient, feels insane defensively, just feels really solid, because it's element immune, stun immune, it's CI, it's got overleach, it's got great movement speed. Like, I think this thing feels good. Don't worry about Arc getting nerfed. Because when or if or whatever Arc gets, nerfed or fixed or whatever you want to call it, you can just do this. With basically no changes to the tree, you can put on Penance Brand of Dissipation and have an absurd amount of power just from this alone. You can see over here, once you ramp up on this thing and you get the Brand Masteries over here for some extra duration, probably dropping this part over here. And honestly, I kind of like the attachment range. It's already got really crazy damage on just this link setup. You run Fizz to Lightning, it's got like 14 million DPS, just plug and play. And this can become Storm Brand, and this can be optimized even more for a brand setup that's Penance Brand because there's Fizz as scaling. So even the baseline of this build is already really powerful without the construction of Arc. And personally, I feel like playing Penance Brand has felt more powerful in some ways because obviously it has a much more superior playstyle. It's got a passive damage playstyle. Anyways, I hope some of you guys have taken away some of the tech that's being put onto this build that's really, really efficient, that you can squeeze out a lot of power from, especially using this ring. I just think Anathema is like crazy right now, and especially with the presence of so many power charge stackers, I can't see why this ring isn't being used more. Anyways, hope everyone's having a good holiday season. I'll see you guys soon.